So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us in the world. My name is Nikki Chappell. I'm here with my colleague Ryan Murphy, and we're here to introduce our brand new podcast called All Things Microsoft 365 Compliance. So let me first of all introduce myself, and then I'll hand it over to Ryan. So my name is Nikki Chappell. I'm a principal cloud architect working for Cloudway, which is Microsoft Gold partner, and I specialise in everything Microsoft 365 governance and compliance. So it's really balancing that risk between security and productivity. Let me hand you over to Ryan for a quick introduction.
Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, my name is Ryan Murphy. I'm currently working for Epic Global. I started in November of last year, and I'm a compliance practice lead here. So I'm helping large organizations that are heavily regulated through the M365 solution stack, adopting that and abiding to regulatory compliance needs, whether they be internal or external. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, sort of back to me again. So other things that I do is I've got my own blog post, nikkichappell.com. So as well as this podcast, we'll be putting articles either on my blog, and also Ryan's got his as well. So I'll let you share what your one's called as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's MSFT Compliance, and on there I have all things compliance. So I've got some videos around setting up sensitivity labels, a traffic light system for sensitivity labels, auditing, retention, even some elements around Sec 17A for those who are in the US under financial regulations. We've also got a standard page for the all things M365 compliance pod that we're doing now, which is on Twitter. And we'll put all the links into the channel as well here.
Okay. So I'm really glad that you kind of joined us for the first episode, and really the purpose of this podcast is really to demystify some of the things for kind of Microsoft 365 governance and compliance functionality, which is now under a new umbrella name called Purview. So what we want to try and do is explain how the features and functionality work, but not only that, we want to be able to demonstrate to you how they're really used in the real world environments, you know, the positives, the negatives, the best way of going about it, because there is just so much there. And it's really like, you know, how do you start off? And I think that's the biggest thing with a lot of organizations. You know, you've got these Microsoft licenses, you've got a lot of features and functionality, but where do you start? So really for our viewpoint is we want to make sure that kind of it's a step-by-step change. Start off with something simple, and there is really an order for this. So there's no point, for example, starting off with insider risk management if you haven't really understand and you know what your data is. So what we're going to do for this first session is just take you for a little walk through for all of the features and functionality in the Microsoft Purview Compliance Center. So I'll hand you over to Ryan now.
Thanks again.
Who will share his screen, and we'll just have a discussion.
So hopefully you can see my screen here. So initially
it's not sharing.
It's not sharing. 1 second.
Switch your screen.
Second, Nikki. How's that?
It's perfect. Yes, we've got a view of the Microsoft Purview Compliance Center. So for people who are not sure where we're looking at, if you need an administrator permission, we are compliance.microsoft.com. So that's what it's called at the moment. It may well change its name in the future to something called Purview, but at the moment, compliance.microsoft.com.
Yep, exactly. And that's where we are right at the moment in time. And your initial page as you come through is obviously the home page. So this would be the first thing that you see. Now, Microsoft have cleverly adapted all of the solutions catalog into one single blade. And when you click on the catalog, here is what you're presented with. So originally, you get the information protection and governance pane here, which covers off data lifecycle management, data loss prevention, Microsoft information protection, and records management. So that enables you to classify and protect items within your environment. Moving down from there, you have the privacy model, which is more around building privacy for your actual applications and your data inside of your environment. We have insider risk management, which comes with communications compliance, Microsoft information barriers, which allows you to put technical walls, blocking walls, and ethical walls inside of your environment. And you have insider risk management, which detects risky activity throughout your environment. So that's your insider threat solution. Discover, array, and respond. So you have audits there. You have the default auditing, and you also have the ability to do some advanced auditing. You have the data subject requests, and additionally, you have e-discovery, which comes in 2 flavors, which is standard, which is E3, and then you also have premium, which is E5.
I think what it would be good to kind of go through is just to kind of highlight that actually some of this, you mentioned about the E5 licenses. So what you get for kind of the business premium and the E3 licenses is a subset of this functionality. And then some of the features are premium, and you do need to go up to the E5 compliance. So as you mentioned, e-discovery, you've got a standard product and you've got a premium. Also, the functionality for insider risk management, communication compliance, and information barriers will be that E5 compliance as well. So that's the add-on. With the other functionality, so if you scroll back up to the information protection and governance, everyone gets a form of information protection and governance. And again, it changes depending on the licenses. And really the major change between the business premium and the E3 or even the A3 licenses and going up to A5 and E5 is the automation classification and automation of controls and automation of retention. So think a bit about the basic licenses allow you from an end user viewpoint to go through and classify and tag and put the rules on the documentation. If you want to use the automated functionality, then you're paying for the premium. Exactly. And then I think the last one is under the privacy element, that is actually an add-on license. So that privacy management element is not part of any of the business premium E3 or E5 type, like that is an add-on, the Priva functionality. You can choose to use it for like subject access requests, and I think they charge you something like $200 at a time, or you can have and again an add-on functionality. So when you see a lot of the features and functionality, it's really important to know what licensing you've got. And really, we're talking in licensing for all users, because obviously data could be anywhere and anyone can have the access to that data.
Yeah, just to plug into that as well, Nikki, Microsoft do offer a licensing matrix. Maybe you can put a link into that, into the podcast and onto YouTube as well. And you can use that to your advantage, and you can understand what solutions come with what license and what the bolt-on licenses give you, whether they're the compliance licenses or the security licenses.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So really, I think to start the journey with this, there is a lot of information here. So it's like anything, you can't really plan where you want to go until you know where you are. So really, I would say the first key step for this is start off. What is your vision? Where do you want to go? Where do you see? You know, where is your kind of ideal place to go? Then you've got to start looking back at where you are. Where is your critical data? What is important to you? What are those risks that you've got? What legislation do you need to comply with? So that is really the first step, and that's kind of beyond this Microsoft Purview, because this is a set of tools that can help you support compliance. But first of all, you need to know those big questions, and they are not to do with IT, they are business-based questions. So that's really kind of, I would say, my first top tip is to think about is what legislation do you need to comply with? So anybody based in Europe, obviously it's GDPR. You might have particular like certifications like ISO 27001. You might be in like the financial industries or other industries where you've kind of got that particular certification. So the first thing is to really understand that and then see how these tools within Microsoft Purview can support you and make your journey easier.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's take a look at Compliance Manager. So Compliance Manager actually gives you the ability to use the predefined assessments for GDPR, like Nikki just alluded to, even within the financial industries like FINRA, SEC 17A, PRA, and even other industries like ISO 27001. And your initial screen gives you your compliance score. Now, I'm sure anybody coming in here would like to get that score as high as possible. However, what I've noticed, and I'm sure everybody who comes in here has noticed, is people start to get into analysis paralysis with this particular number, and they want to try and get up as high as possible. Now, that's great if that suits your organization. If you can understand what regulatory alignment you have or compliance features and roles that you need, great, get it up. But don't be just thinking, I need to get this up as high as possible. There has been cases where I've been involved with where this number's just been pushed up as far as possible. But there's actually a detrimental effect to that. You can actually reduce work, supplements in your environment on what your users are doing and interacting with, and reducing that ability to have that collaboration. So come in here and assess what it is that you actually need to do. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, so see, everybody gets this ability to view a compliance score. So what you see to start off with is called the data protection baseline assessment. So it's kind of best practice from NIST and GDPR and a few other standards here. So that's what you get. Now, if you've got the A5 or E5 licenses, you can get some additional templates that you can use that address the particular questions are, say, within GDPR or FINRA or ISO 27001. Now, in addition to that, you can purchase other industry-specific ones. So I think there's over 200 now different licenses. So really, they're there to help guide, to demonstrate how can Microsoft 365 or how can Azure or even how can some of your other solutions, how can they support the compliance? Now, these templates come in 3 forms. As you can see under the product, you've got Microsoft 365. So this is where the templates will recommend how you can configure your controls within Microsoft 365 to support compliance in the area. There is some other ones that I don't, the Azure-based one. So if you are using Azure to host a lot of cloud services, you will see some of the templates come in an Azure forms, and that's looking at best practice for configuring Azure. The third area one, I think further down under EU GDPR, for example, there's one called Universal. And what this is kind of more like a skeleton template. So it's taking all of those controls and it has the actual relating to the numbers of those controls there. And basically it's a template that will give you some of the best practice controls, but really it's a framework where you can start assigning tasks and activities for people. You can put your own controls in there. So if you're using other solutions other than Microsoft 365, which a lot of organizations are using, could be using tens, hundreds of different systems. If you want, you could use this as kind of a tool to try and pull all of that information together.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I really like about this is the Microsoft lawyers have done all the work here for you. They've bundled them up into the relevant regulatory body and added in everything that you need to do to go through it and make sure your alignment with that regulatory body fits into M365. That's why they have 2 of them, as Nikki has just alluded to. You've got EU GDPR for Microsoft 365, and then the actual standardized regulatory body emission there as well. So with the M365 ones, of course, that's going to give you what you need to do inside of Microsoft 365 to map back to the regulatory body from a technical perspective.
And I think as well as the technical stuff, they actually really cleverly give you suggestions of how you can actually support with operational controls and documentation controls. So these are things that actually are not part of Microsoft 365, but they guide you and give you some information to say you need some policies and processes in here. You need some operational controls as well. So so we've just gone into the EU GDPR template and let's have a little drill down to actually see what does this actually contain.
Yeah, absolutely. So your initial page as you open up any assessment template is the overview. And on the left-hand side, it will actually give you an indication of when this was last updated. So if the regulatory body updates any elements inside of those regulations themselves, you can come in here and see if that's actually aligned with the new updates. Additionally, from that, you've got the About, which gives a great link back to the actual regulatory body's main page as well. So if there's anything you wanted to double check or see what's been updated, you can certainly do that. From a controls perspective, you've got all of the controls that may be aligned to this particular regulatory body, or if any of them overlap, like the PRA and FCA, you've also got those in there as well, so you can have that double alignment. Additionally, from here, you've got the controls and processes. So as Nikki's just alluded to, you can come through here and see what are those controller and processor elements that I have to go through, entities that I have to go through. You can choose one of them, wherever it may be under that regulatory body, and it will take you through to the actions that you need to take to actually align with that particular entity within inside the regulatory body. Of course, you've also got the ability to go through the Microsoft actions. So if there's anything from a Microsoft standpoint there that they have to align to for you to be able to map back to that regulatory body, that comes under there as well. I'll just go back into the assessment template. Okay. Sorry, Nikki,
I think you're still in the universal one here. I think you want EU GDPR for Microsoft 365.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's one thing to note when you do look at this. It's quite easy. You kind of look through it and you'll see there's several templates. So recommend that you use the Microsoft one first, kind of get a grip of how it works here. And I think the important thing to remember is Microsoft 365 is a SaaS service. Therefore, this is what's called a joint responsibility model, because Microsoft are responsible for managing the data centers, the networks, the servers, the applications within there. So there's lots of controls within GDPR or NIST or ISO, PCI DSS, where there's controls that saying, you know, security and access to the server rooms, for example. Well, you're not responsible for that, but it will still document that information there, and it will demonstrate how Microsoft manages those controls. That's really important when it's that shared responsibility model. You're devolving that responsibility to Microsoft to support you in this, and then Microsoft can demonstrate that. So it's a great way to demonstrate to your auditors that you are compliant end to end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's take a look at the improvement actions. So these are here to guide you through what you need to do from a Microsoft 365 perspective. So those are there for you to adopt. So like any company, there must be under some type of regulatory, whether it be PII regulatory body or a financial services or even a law or a health one. If you choose that regulatory assessment template that fits to your business, coming through to the improvement actions actually shows you what you need to do from a technical perspective and enable in your environment or configure in your environment to map back to that regulatory body. So we just take here, for example, adhere to defined retention policies. If I click on this, it gives me the implementation status of what I actually need to do. And then where that maps back to the standards and regulations. And of course, this comes under the GDPR, information obligation, fair and transparent processing. So coming through here then, as I state, you can go through all of these. And for those on the podcast, we're actually working through all the improvement actions here, just to give you some visibility on how this can help you build out this to abide by that regulatory body.
One thing that I would recommend with this, there are a lot of controls here. So what you will see the controls that are relevant to your licensing. So in here, I just noticed there was something about automatically classifying your content. Well, actually, that's a premium license. You need the A or E5 licensing for that. So if you're a small premium or an E3, A3 customer, you would not see those controls. So Microsoft are not going to say implement this when you don't have the licensing for you. And you can have, I think, up to 600-700 controls. So that can be quite scary to start off with. How do I start? Now, the really good thing here is Microsoft have categorized them with a scoring metrics, depending on really the priority. So the higher the number, the higher the priority is. So that's a really good way of looking at it. Look for those ones that are 27 points, which is the highest possible points, and look at those. Look at preparing kind of a prioritized plan to look at this.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good point on the licensing and the points there as well, Nikki. So that essentially is Compliance Manager in a nutshell. And a lot of people, I mean, from my experience, I work with a lot of customers that are just E5 because they're generally large financial organizations, and they will often say on their journey into 365, where do I start? Where do I start to understand what regulations or what configurations that I can put in place to abide by the regulatory body in X region or in X industry? For me, coming in here and reviewing these and understanding what it actually gives you back from an M365 perspective is probably one of the first things you need to do. And come into here, understand which region you're in and which regulatory bodies that you abide by, whether they be PII or financial, and then go from there and start to understand how you're going to map that back into your environment to abide by those.
So it might be worth going back to that overview page, actually, because that kind of is, before you even kind of delve into this kind of, for me, is getting kind of a quick view of that score. So you can see your 49% there. But if you look underneath, it will show your points achieved and the points that Microsoft achieved as well. So you can see that all of the controls for the baseline assessment that Microsoft are responsible for in that shared responsibility model, they will demonstrate and say that they're compliant. So really what you've got next to that chart on that kind of middle section here, they are some of the top ones, key improvement actions. So rather than looking at, look, 1,706 items there, it's kind of pulling you some of those top ones. Now, what you'll also see here is that test status here as well. And some of the other elements is that if Microsoft can see that you configured a control, it will automatically tick the box for you. Some of them you have to actually go in and actually say you've undertaken some action. So some things are automatically controlled, other things aren't. So do also be aware that even though it's showing that you're not compliant, if the test controls are, you need to actually go in and tick the box yourself. You do need to go through that, and you'll probably see you're higher along the score than Microsoft can kind of automatically assess.
Absolutely. And the other things I like on this page as well is the fact that you get the solutions that affect your score. So you can see the solutions that you have data organized in or users are actually interacting with, and you can actually go back into here and start to assess what those remaining actions are. So if I were to click on audit here, it would give me a list of what improvement actions I need to take from an audit perspective across all of the actual regulatory alignments that I have, not just the database, the data protection baseline. Additionally, on the overview page, we have the compliance score breakdown. So this actually breaks down what that 49% is broken down into. So you can see here you've got protect information, 40% on govern information, control access is 5, manage devices, which is a very important thing to add into. You know, compliance doesn't just stop and start within the compliance portal. You've got in-tune compliance policies that you can adopt and put into place as well. Protect against threats, discover and respond, manage internal risk, manage compliance and privacy management. So you can see across that end-to-end workflow from a Microsoft 365 compliance perspective, where your points align to and how you can improve them within a particular area. So if you have a regulatory body that states that your records management and information governance, or data lifecycle management, as it's called now, has to be within a certain remit of conditions and controls, you can come in here and start to assess, okay, I have 54 out of 135 points achieved. Do I have everything I need to abide by that regulatory body when it comes to governing information?
And the other thing to kind of you point out with this is not just a tool that is static. So as Microsoft change their features and functionality, as new regulations or changes to the regulations come up, it is dynamic. You can also use this tool as well. So you can see there's some pending updates here to the different standards, but you can also use this tool to track your compliance. So it's not just a case of this is a static thing here. You can go into each of those elements. You can look at those elements and say, is it appropriate to me? Because for some things, so there's controls in here about managing mobile devices, for example. Well, if you don't use mobile devices, you can take those out of scope and then the total score will go down. You can also go in there and assign actions to people. So you can use this as kind of your activity tracker. So you can prioritize what's important to you. You can assign those tasks to people, and they can then upload evidence. They can demonstrate compliance with those things. So you can either do it within the tool, or there is an option to be able to export it out as well as a CSV file. So if you want to take all of those controls out and put it in another tool where you're actively managing your workload, you can do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to extend onto that as well, for the assessment templates that you've chosen as a business, when you click on the assessments tab on the compliance manager, it will show you the ones that you've actually brought in for you to work on and assess those improvement actions. I really like this screen because it gives you the assessment progress. So you know how far through that particular assessment template you are and how many potentially items that you've adopted from it. So you've got 12 out of 330 here from your improvement actions. And then you have the Microsoft actions of what they've taken in the background to make sure the solutions abide by those regulatory bodies. Then you have the group of where it belongs to, and then the product of where it actually maps back to. And more importantly, what that regulatory body is. And as Nikki's just said previously, you get the pending update. So you can come in here and see whenever those regulatory bodies have been updated, the Microsoft lawyers in the background will go and grab that new data or that change data or that addendum to that document. They'll bring it through, and all you simply have to do is click on the actual assessment template of which you have, go up to the top where it shows you the yellow banner and click review update. That will then give you those updates for that regulatory body. You don't have to do anything. Microsoft does it all in the background. You simply view and accept the changes, and you can do that by simply clicking one button. And that's it. You've got those changes now inside of your environment.
Yeah, I think it is just so helpful that they're giving you those updates. They're drip feeding those in, so you will get notified even if you're looking at those particular controls. So that is one of the benefits of actually working with the tool directly inside Microsoft 365, then exporting it out. If you do export it out, do keep an eye on this, because obviously if those controls are changed and you've just taken a static snapshot, you're not going to be able to get those updates. So you do always need to keep an eye on this.
Yeah, it's a constant improvement, isn't it, Nikki? It's a constant fine-tuning of what you've got in comparison to what the regulatory body changes. So I think that's a very, very valid point to keep an eye on this. Use it as a work in progress throughout the life cycle of that regulatory body and the data that you've got inside of your environment, of course.
And then I think one of the kind of key things, because we're coming up to the kind of end of the time for this first episode, but I think really the important thing to take away from this is that compliance isn't just a one-off project. It's not something where you get a group of people together, you assign a set of tasks, and you say, we're done. You know, compliance has to be built in to your business operations, part of those business usual process. And this is where compliance manager, again, needs to fit into those processes, working with the compliance teams, working with the security teams. They can't work in isolation. The two really overlap. So it's really important to understand, first of all, what this product is and how that can support you on the journey. So it's not just seen as, oh, let's look at those high priority items. I finished that. I don't need to look at it again. For me, it's getting this built into your everyday processes to say, how can this support you? How can it make your life easier?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's important for people listening that this podcast is for your whole organization. It's not just for your techies. It's for your CTOs, your CIOs, your legal, your risk teams. It's for everybody, because we want to cover off everything from an end to end. So we'll give you the introductory pieces as we've just done on Compliance Manager, but we'll also touch on some of the technical on the episodes as well, about the technical implementation of it, considerations to your organizations, what some of the actual features do. Okay.
Okay, so well, thank you very much for joining us on the first episode of our podcast. So I'm Nikki Chappell, Principal Cloud Architect at Cloudway and Microsoft MVP. So thank you very much from me.
And I'm Ryan Murphy, again, Compliance Practice Lead at Epic. And thank you very much from me.
We'll see you next time. Thank you.
See you. Bye.